So my background is USDA. I worked at USDA for about 4.5 years. I currently work at Covington and Burling as a FDA regulatory attorney advising companies, especially companies in the startup space that are looking to produce alternative proteins. And so my job today is to talk about the regulatory conversation from the standpoint of barriers that companies would face from an FDA, USDA regulatory standpoint. So a key question is, who are the relevant regulatory agencies and why? What is actually regulated and by whom, and what developments are on the horizon? As we can see, there's been a lot of discussion in the press regarding these different types of alternative protein products, from the cell cultured meat to the dairy made in the lab, as the New York Times says. And a big question is regarding both safety, and another big question is regarding labeling. So how do we get these products to market safely so that consumers can trust the safety profile of the products? And also, what types of labeling would be considered truthful and not misleading, but also would impose sort of a hurdle to companies that are trying to truthfully market their products? So just by way of brief background, the key regulators in the United States, we have two food regulatory agencies, the USDA and the FDA. And this is really just a relic of the past, where USDA was the primary overseer of agriculture and food. There was a Bureau of Chemistry, and in 1906 or thereabouts, the FDA sort of became its own thing after the rollout of the Pure Food and Drug Act. And so today, FDA has broad authority to regulate all foods, with the exception of meat and poultry products and certain egg products. FDA is in charge of determining the safety of all ingredients that are used in meat and poultry products. FDA regulates food products with biotechnology, including GE animals, although that's subject to change based on a recent MOU that was entered at the end of the last administration. And FDA importantly regulates microbial, algal, and fungal cells generated by large-scale culture. So some of the key considerations that companies in this space have to navigate are pre-market safety, manufacturing, labeling. When it comes to pre-market safety, we know that FDA is interested in understanding the substances used in the manufacture of plant-based foods and other alternative proteins like cell-cultured meat. And cell-cultured meat, for everyone's reference, in case you're not aware of it, is also called in the press lab-grown meat. We don't like to use that term because it's pejorative, but basically you're producing meat outside the animal using biopsies of healthy cells from animals like chicken, cows, pigs, etc. And there are a number of startups around the world, we'll talk about them very shortly, that are in this space, and they're trying to revolutionize the way that meat is produced in the world. So when it comes to manufacturing process, the good news is that the FDA and USDA have hazard analysis and control measure requirements and GMP requirements, good manufacturing requirements already on the books. So the trick here would be to apply those existing laws to this novel way of producing food. And then when it comes to labeling, there's been a big debate regarding product naming. For example, if you're producing these products in a non-conventional way, do they qualify as milk or meat products? And what claims can be used? Can you say flora-based if you're producing a dairy product using microflora? Is it necessary to disclose the production process on the labeling? So when it comes to the world of cell-cultured meat, as I mentioned, there are a number of startups around the world that are investigating the possibility of producing meat and poultry products, duck, chicken, pork, etc., through cell culture technology. And as of June 2020, there were well over 40 or 50 of these startups, many of them in the United States, but many in Europe, some in Asia and Japan in particular. And then Israel has a number of startups in this space. And they're all in the midst of getting lots of funding. Some of the leading companies in this space would be Memphis Meats here in the United States. We have Just, which got approval, the first ever in Singapore, for its cell-based, cell-cultured chicken product. So that's the world's first, and that will hopefully kind of speed up what's happening in other parts of the world as we see that these products can come to market sooner rather than later. So in the United States, we're moving a little bit more slowly, but still very quickly when you think about other technologies that have come on stream. We have a memorandum of understanding between the two food regulators I mentioned, the FDA and the USDA, that was released back in March of 2019. It outlines how the agencies will work together. This has been sort of a hurdle for companies because they can't, like their plant-based meat counterparts, get their products out to market after establishing safety right away. They have to actually wait for the regulators to develop a framework for this technology, which the law has not caught up to. So that's essentially what this MOU is all about, explaining how the FDA and USDA will work together, leveraging their existing authorities under the statutes that they administer. And so here, FDA will exercise regulatory oversight up until the point of what we call harvest, because these products are made in a bioreactor. They're fed a nutrient-rich broth. Once the products are harvested, once the tissue is grown, then that's called a point of harvest. And that's when the USDA will take over its inspection authorities for the processing of the meat and the labeling of the meat and the handling of the meat until the consumer receives it. And the thinking is that the products produced through cell culture technology that are meat and poultry will have that mark that you normally see on the labels of meat products and poultry products, which is that mark of federal inspection. So for cell cultured meat, we take those same boxes of considerations: pre-market safety, manufacturing, labeling, and then facility inspection. And these are the considerations that companies in this space that are R&D, that are hoping to commercialize, have to consider and go through and make sure they're meeting the FDA requirements. And these different considerations are being fleshed out by the FDA and USDA under that MOU we just talked about. And there are 3 interagency working groups at the FDA and USDA that are focused on fleshing out the framework to facilitate the rollout of these products. So we have a pre-market safety group that is spearheaded by the FDA, a transfer of jurisdiction group that's focused on that transition from FDA to USDA oversight when you're making a meat or poultry product. And then you have the whole labeling group that is tackling that very hot button issue. And we'll get into that in a second. In terms of plant-based foods, if you take a look at this screen, you'll see a number of products that are very familiar. And all these products were able to get to market because they just had to demonstrate safety. These are all plant-based products that once you're able to demonstrate the safety under FDA requirements, then you can roll out your product. And there has been some controversy regarding the labeling that you see here of some products. So you have fermented almond milk. So there's controversy over whether you can actually label this product as an almond milk versus an almond drink, because milk itself has what we call a standard of identity that says that it's the lacteal secretion from a cow, and it goes on with further specifications. And then there's also the big question of, can you call a product meat if it's actually derived from plants? This was added here to just give you a demonstration of a company based on publicly available information, Perfect Day, and how they produce dairy products through cellular agriculture, through a fermentation tank, and it yields essentially the milk proteins that form the basis of dairy products that we all know and love. And they needed to navigate what we call a GRAS process, generally recognized as safe. Again, this is something that's on the books. You have to demonstrate safety such that based on publicly available information, such that qualified experts in the field would concur with the determination of safety. And so there are bases of safety, and I'm definitely doing a very super high level overview of this. They had to look at the production strain. They had to demonstrate there was a long history and safe use of the production organism that was used to generate their protein. And they did a number of studies and comparisons as part of the GRAS notice. And this is something that's publicly available on FDA's database. But this is something that's very key to most companies in the space that are producing alternative proteins, where their star ingredient or some other ingredients that are part of their preparation would need to undergo a review. A GRAS notice is something under FDA's paradigm that it's considered to be voluntary, but from a diligence perspective, a lot of companies in your supply chain would expect you to have FDA review your determination of safety. And that's usually done by way of a GRAS notice filing with the FDA. In terms of labeling, there's been a number of developments. As you see here, FDA has taken comments from the public on the naming of dairy foods in labeling plant-based products. The FDA is actively seeking input on the labeling of foods containing cell-cultured seafoods. Again, those are products that are made outside of the conventional means. So you're making seafood as well as meat and poultry outside of conventional means of raising animals. There's a big labeling debate in the United States, and this has been posing a big question and hurdle for some companies. You have the conventional trade associations, such as the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, requesting back in 2018 that USDA limit the definition of beef to product from cattle born, raised, and harvested in a traditional manner. And they also requested a broader definition, that the broader definition of meat be limited to the flesh of animals that have been harvested in the traditional manner. That affects both plant-based products as well as these newer R&D cell-cultured meat products. There's also been activity at the in Congress. There's the Real Meat Act of 2019, which it's very possible that this will be proposed yet again in the coming weeks. The question here really boils down to, there's a bunch of standards of identity that define how various products are defined, that define various products like hamburger, and they give you specifications for what they should be comprised of. And they don't expressly consider any other method of producing the meat. And so a lot of what we're seeing at the state level and the federal level is really boils down to what's already on the books, and do we actually need new rules? Some of the states like Missouri and Louisiana have put laws on the books at the state level to ban the use of certain terms, limiting the ways in which you can use the terms meat and beef to limit it to basically meat from agricultural livestock. We think that if the USDA steps in, for example, whenever the federal regulators step in, and that usually trumps what's going on at the state level, especially the way that the USDA statutes are written in terms of their labeling oversight. So in terms of labeling consumer perception, I think it's pretty obvious that the labeling debates that are ongoing at the state level will impact what's going on at the federal level, and how federal regulators decide to move forward on labeling will certainly impact consumer perception, because that's the first way that folks will interact with the product. So looking ahead, I think we'll see more clarification from FDA and USDA regarding the regulatory frameworks for cell-cultured meat. We have some rulemaking that we know will be occurring on labeling for cell-cultured meat and poultry, and we now know that FDA will be requesting some information from stakeholders on the labeling of cell-cultured seafood. We think that we could see possible pronouncements from FDA on the labeling of plant-based dairy, another hot button issue, and there's definitely going to be a lot of political interest at both the state and federal levels. I've done some thought leadership on the issues that we've addressed today, and I'll be sharing my slide deck so that they'll be posted for the group, and I'm happy to participate in questions.